I have an uncle who's obsessed with lottery tickets. Every single week, he would spend $10 to $15 on these little slips of papers in hopes of winning some cash. So one day, out of curiosity, I went up to him and asked why he keeps spending his money on these tickets, even though he knows that he only has a very low chance of winning. And he told me it's because he wanted $1 million. He wanted to know what it feels like to become a lottery winner. And that leads to our topic today of needs versus wants. So, needs are things that we require in life in order to survive, whereas wants has more to do with a desire. It's what we think we need, but we actually oftentimes do not. So why should we distinguish these two different ideas? How does it affect us? Well, one, sometimes our desires can become so empowering that they cloud our judgment and can lead us to act impulsively. My uncle, for example, spends around $500 a year on lottery tickets alone. He believes that if he wins the money, he can buy anything in the world. And he cannot break from this habit because he's so consumed by his desire for wealth. And that attitude reflects our current society. As you can see in the graph, we have become more materialistic over time. We believe that items such as TVs, dishwashers, and microwaves are necessities. We believe that we cannot survive without these items. But that is not always the case, as people hundreds of years ago could survive just fine without them. And this trend demonstrates how as society progresses and becomes more modernized, our desires become more apparent and we become more materialistic. And then we have more difficulties distinguishing the difference between needs and wants. Although our desires have become more apparent over the past 100 years, they have always been with us. They're just part of human nature. Tying it back to our ancestors, evolution has programmed us to desire things naturally because it increases our chances of living. Although we can't get rid of desires, we can learn how to distinguish the different types. For example, there's physiological desires and there's psychological desires. Physiological desires, which are our needs, include things such as food, shelter, and water, whereas psychological desires has more to do with our emotions and our behaviors. For example, nostalgia, that's a desire for the past, whereas depression, stress, that's a desire for the future, for something that we can't have. Learning how to distinguish between psychological and physiological desires can help us create more balance and can help prevent one from taking over another. Because sometimes our wants become so prominent and dominant that they take over our needs, and that can oftentimes lead to arrogance and greediness. For example, a study conducted by the University of California, Berkeley, found out that upper class participants were more likely to, who participated in the study, were more likely to cheat when gambling or negotiating, and cut people off when driving, and endorse unethical behavior in the workplace. And that's because they are more motivated by greediness. They have more money, therefore they have more desires. They want more things and they can obtain it more easily. So they are not affected by the issue of needs because they can just get everything they want simply through their wealth. Different cultures and different religions have different perspectives on desires. But one thing that they have in common is that they believe that desires are just part of human nature, and that sometimes it can lead to pain and suffering if we don't learn how to control it. For example, humans, they always want something in life, but if they don't receive that something, that they can oftentimes feel a sense of loss or the sense that they're missing something, and that can oftentimes make them unhappy and sad. So we should learn how to distinguish between needs and wants in order to balance everything out. And one way to do that is that before we go out and buy something, or we think we should do something, we should ask the essential question of, will I die without this? And if the answer is yes, then that's classified as a need. Whereas if the answer is a no, then that's a want.